Today, my guest is Rosemary Olander.
I want to become rich. And Jubal looks at him and he says, no, you don't want to become rich. You want to have money so you can do the things you want to do. Mistakes are opportunities as long as you don't repeat them, as long as you learn from them, and as long as you understand why it went sour, why it went bad. So observe your kids constantly so that you know it, for each of them what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what their fears are, what their concerns are, what their hopes are. Understand who they are.
Parents don't want to look at themselves and they're blaming the kids. The kids are kids. They're only learning what the parents are teaching them.
Storytelling is a great way to connect with your kids.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Anomaly Factor. You're not swimming in the wrong direction. You have the Anomaly Factor. I'm Janet Hamilton and I'm your host. And today my guest is Rosemary Olander. And her topic today is about rich kids and how we raise them. Welcome, Rosemary. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? It's good to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about this topic because it hits home for me a lot, as you know. Why don't you tell our guests a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Okay. I have been a teacher and an educator and an administrator for more than 4 decades. From 2003 until COVID, I had formally retired in 2003, and then I started doing consultant work around the state of New York with public schools, and mostly dealing with faculties and families that wanted to figure out how to work more cooperatively with the school district and advocating for their children to get the services they needed. I was a director of special education just before I formally retired. My background is speech pathology communications, and I was a teacher of the deaf. So I taught the profoundly deaf for several years before I became an administrator. And over the course of that time, I wrote one nonfiction book in 2010 called The School Home Connection: Forging Positive Relationships with Parents. And then when COVID hit, I finally put pen to paper and completed a book that I had wanted to write since 1991 about my dad. And it was originally supposed to be just a memoir, but as my ARC readers and my beta readers started to read the book and friends read it, they kind of showed me that it really was more an extension of my professional life as well, because it was a treatise for parents on how to raise rich kids without using their money, putting their wallets away and focusing on the key things that are so important for children to grow up to be rich. And what I mean by that is to be resilient and independent and confident and happy, which all leads to personal and professional success. So that's kind of my background.
Might I add health as well?
Oh, yes, healthy as well, of course. Well,
Yeah.
emotionally healthy for sure. And then physically healthy because they will be more discerning and figure out what their bodies need and to be successful. So let me start where this all started. In 1991, my dad was dying, and I was in the hospital with him the night before he passed. And he took what was to be some of his last words to apologize to me for leaving me and my sister with, in his words, nothing. And it kind of took my breath away because my sister and I have always talked about and considered ourselves to be two of the richest people in the world. Not in money, but in our ability to handle whatever comes our way, and our ability to take negative situations and turn them around, and in our ability to make friends and keep friends and all of that. So I looked at him and I said, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. And he said, I'm leaving you, and there's no sizable amount of money in the bank. Our house has no marketable value, and we have a used car. And I said, well, those are just things. those are things. That's not what made us rich. Do you not understand we won the lottery the day we were born, to you and mom? And then it was his turn to be confused. And he said, what do you mean? I've given you nothing. And I said, oh, let's talk about that. So for the next 40 minutes, I talked to him about who he was as a dad and who he was as a man that we could observe and interact with and feel throughout our lives. And out of that conversation came, well, that was in 1991, came my working years where I would just jot down ideas to kind of flesh that out because I could see that after I talked to him, he visibly relaxed and smiled because I think he felt he was off the hook, and I don't know why he ever felt he was on the hook for leaving us with nothing. But I could see him physically relax, and I knew that what he did was a blessing. It was a gift to me to say that so that I could gift him back and say, no, no, you quite the opposite, Dad. So I'm glad I had that opportunity, and I encourage kids and I encourage people now. If you haven't told your loved ones how you feel about them, make sure you do, because don't assume that they know. I assumed he knew how much I loved him, but obviously he didn't. So then along comes COVID. What was I going to do? So I said, well, all right, let's write the book. Let's put it together. And so the book is framed around 12 gifts. There are more, but I selected the 12 that I felt really had the most impact on my life. And each chapter discusses one gift. And in the discussion is a short description or explanation of why that gift is so important to a child's well-being, to a child's character. And then the next section is a list of reflections of mine over the years of observing that gift as it was demonstrated or discussed or given to me. And then the third section are some suggestions for parents. Here are some things you can do to instill this gift on your child. I'm sure they're doing a lot of them, but they may be able to tweak some. And it's so important that they have sort of some suggestions and ideas because, I know that the demands on families have just increased astronomically in recent years. The demands on parents for more of their time, more of their money, more of their information, more of their resources is just growing. And yet, parents are reporting and families are reporting that they feel less connected and more disconnected from each other because they're so busy. Their time constraints are heavy, and their knowledge base, if they haven't had time to keep up with what everybody's saying. So it's important that parents have a little bit maybe of a guide. Here are some things that are important. And from my 4 decades of observing families and working with families and working with parents, particularly families did not have a lot of money. We live in a hustle culture, and it's all about giving your kids what they want, and parents are feeling like they need to give their kids what they want in order to show them their love. And I'm here to say, no, this is an anomaly I'm talking about. Let's look at the non-material gifts. So put your wallets away. Let's talk about the non-material gifts. And so that's how the book is set up. And then at the end of the book, there is a little journal that parents can take and look at each gift and say, each chapter, well, how do we do this in our family? What could we do to do it more? Or how could we do it if we're not doing it now? Which is helpful. And then the other thing I did was I created a parent family connection insight questionnaire that if people contact me and email me, I'd be happy to send them one. That is a way for them to say, well, how connected are we as a family? And what's getting in our way? And what could we do? It's for themselves to look at. And then certainly down the road, if they wanted to talk to me, I'd be happy to do that. So we're doing that. So that's how the book is set up.
I think it's brilliant. And I think to have a guide, especially as a new parent, when you think you know and we don't really know, and we're all just doing the best we can, I think it's very important because I've learned it's affected my life like to no tomorrow. And with the amount of people aging and people like ourselves that are sandwiched between elderly people and our kids, the burnout rate is just like no tomorrow, and
Right.
all of it
And
adds up. Yeah.
right. And you know, this is a good it's not just for parents, it's for grandparents, it's for educators, social workers, anyone who's working with children to understand that it's not what you give them in objects. It's what you give them here in your heart, what you show them who they are. You know, in the 1980s, a group of resiliency studies were done to try and figure out what helped people get above terrible situations they rose in. So this one study that was done took 100 people that had risen out of horrific situations. They took adults who had been abused physically, sexually, neglected, drug abuse, all of that, and thought, okay, they made it. They were successful. So then first they had to define, well, what does successful mean? Well, successful meant that they were independent, they were confident in whatever they were doing, whether they were carrying out a job at a local restaurant or they had become a doctor. The key was that they could take care of themselves, they could have enough money, keep a job, those kinds of things. 100 of them. And then they said, okay, let's do a root cause analysis. What's the root cause of them all being successful? Why did they make it when some of their siblings didn't? Why is that? And what they found was that in all 100 cases, each person reported that they had had at least one significant adult in their life that convinced them that they could do anything they wanted to do and become whatever they wanted to become. And the interesting thing was 87 out of the 100 were teachers. So when I would run faculty meetings or workshops around the state for faculties, I would start my presentation with that statistic and say, if you think that you don't have power over the kids you're teaching, think again, and you need to use that power responsibly because you have the power to make or break a kid. And you don't have any right to break a kid. It's your job and your duty to make that kid believe and have hope that anything is possible. So that's where we started. So going forward, I thought, well, let me put this book together and talk with educators and talk with parents and grandparents. In fact, I'm meeting with a bunch of grandparents this evening to talk about what they can do to help their grandchildren, to instill a legacy of character in their grandchildren.
That's
And
beautiful.
we're going to be.
I see another book there for grandparents and for their
Oh,
grandchildren.
yeah. People have said that. A lot of people have said to me, "Are you going to do one about your mother?" And I said, "Well, that's a very different book. I mean, my mother was great, and she had wonderful teaching qualities in terms of gifting us, but they were very different. My mother was she was a trailblazer for sure. She was one of the first women to take. She was the first woman to take mechanical drawing in her high school
Wow.
because she loved to draw. She was a fantastic artist. She would carve statues out of soap. She would do pen and ink drawings. She did amazing stuff. And she wanted to take mechanical drawing. And they told her she couldn't because she was a woman. She was a girl. And it was only for boys. And she said, wait a minute. This can't be right. I mean, just because nobody has done it doesn't mean a girl can't do it. So they reluctantly agreed to let her take the class, and they would check with the professor monthly to see if she should stay in the class. Well, she took it and she did, and she was great, and it was all good. So she was one of the first person to do that. She was also one of the first girls to smoke against her parents' wishes. She did what she wanted to do. And she blazed a trail for some of her friends. She dated more than one guy. In those days, whoever you dated, you married. She was like, no, that's silly. So I think probably a lot of me is in my mother too. So that may be another book. Grandparents is certainly, another section that could be done. I don't know if I have it in me to do another book. I'd like to get this word out because, I mean, quite frankly, why is this important? Well, if you look at what's going on right now, There is
Yeah.
so much self-centeredness. There's so much focus on money and things, losing your core values to gain money or gain prestige and think, okay, well, once I have money, then I can do it my way. It doesn't work that way. Back in 1959, Robert Heinlein wrote a book about a Martian coming to Earth, and Stranger in a Strange Land was the title of the book. Great book. And it talked about a guy who was born on Mars to a Martian and a Earthling. So he was half and half. And he comes to Earth and he has this wonderful mentor who mentors him named Jubal. And the whole book is about him observing life on Earth and talking about it and finding out about it. And my favorite line, which pertains to what I'm doing now, was he realizes at one point, I mean, there's one whole chapter about how he finds out about sports. And he comes to the conclusion that football was America's religion. This was 1959. Think about that,
Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, and it's so true. You watch TV now. It's this past weekend is all about football.
He's
But
a visionary.
right. So then he gets into money and he starts seeing how money's changing hands and people are getting stuff and people can buy food and do all of this. And he says to Jubal, I want to become rich. And Jubal looks at him and he says, no, you don't want to become rich. You want to have money so you can do the things you want to do. And he looks at him and he goes, well, what's the difference? And Jubal says, the difference is the person you will become in order to become rich is not someone you want to be. And
Brilliant.
yeah, brilliant. And that's where I'm at. It's not about money. As I was growing up, I watched friends in my hometown who came from the richest families who owned the steel mill and the copper mill and some of the big businesses. And then we had the city crowd that I was part of, middle class, lower middle class. My father owned a muffler shop, small businessmen or laborers. And I didn't see any difference in happiness between the two groups of kids. In fact, my friends who were in the lake, and I had a lot of them because I was in class, a lot of my classes were with them. They got a car when they turned 16 and got their driver's license. I'm sure they were one of the first people to ever have an iPhone. So I saw that. Yet they spent a lot of time at my house because they enjoyed being around my mother and father, because my father would engage kids all the time. He wanted to know who I was involved with, but he was also very interested in them as individual people. So I saw that money wasn't what did it. There were a lot of very, very wealthy kids, and I saw that continue into college, that were very unhappy. And there were a lot of kids who literally came from nothing that were very happy,
I
And when
agree.
right? And
Yeah.
I went to, we did a little traveling, and I love traveling because I think traveling is, as they say, the antidote to bigotry. I believe that.
Best education going, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Because people become bigoted because they're afraid. They've been taught or they think or they've been convinced that those people somehow could be harmful to them or is taking something away from them. And that's
Or
not
less.
the
Yeah.
yeah. And when we went to Italy, we went to Portugal, we went to France, we went to a bunch of places where people were. I went to Puerto Rico where people have nothing. They're so happy. They're so happy. But they're lovely people. They're great communicators. They are confident in themselves and in their ability to help others, and they're into empathy and perspective.
The
So
relational.
yeah. So, what I do in the book is I talk about the different gifts that kids really need. And I think that one of the gifts that is so important is really the gift of humor. And my father was a very funny, he wasn't funny, ha ha funny, like he would stand up and tell jokes or anything, but he would take a situation that was stressful
Hmm.
and he would make a joke about it because as he would say to me, humor diffuses tension. And when you're in a tense situation, if you can bring a little lightness to it, it's going to help you. So there is a section on humor. And my father did things like, for example, one time he and I were installing an air conditioner in our second floor living room window. We lived on the second floor. And I was helping him. I was probably 14 at the time, and we were shifting it into the window, and it shifted and it went over one of my fingers, and it really hurt. And I pulled my hand back. When I pulled my hand back, the air conditioner started to go forward, and my father went to grab it and actually pushed it more out the window. And so out the window it went. And he looks out and he just starts laughing. I said, "Why are you laughing? It's hot out. Our apartment is hot. What are we going to do now?" And he looked out and he goes, "Well, that puppy is dead. We're not using that." So I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" He said, we've got some fans. We'll pull the fans out until we can get enough money together to buy another air conditioner or see if we can find one somewhere." I said, "Okay." That's the kind of thing he did.
He sounded like a really remarkable man because I think most people in his shoes probably would have reacted and made it about you.
Yeah, true. And the thing, one of the things he taught us is that mistakes are opportunities. As long as you don't repeat them, as long as you learn from them, and as long as you understand why it went sour, why it went bad, that little episode ended up, I think we did get another air conditioner later. I'm not sure how long it was, but it was a while. Another situation we had was he was funny. My sister, one time asked him I happened to be there. My sister and I are 13 and a half years apart. Okay. So we grew up, we talked about this just the other day. We kind of grew up differently, but the same, because I started college the day she started kindergarten. Okay, so we really didn't live in the house together as communicating beings very well. And one night I happened to be home, and she came out of the bedroom and said to my father, "Dad, can I borrow $20 because I'm going out with my friends?" She was in high school, "and we might see a movie, whatever." And he said, "Okay." So he took out his wallet and he gave her the $20. And as she's going to the door, he's waving goodbye. And she said, "Why are you waving goodbye? I'm coming back." He goes, "I'm not waving to you. I'm waving to my money. I don't think I'll see it again."
Yeah, he's probably right.
Yeah, and that's the kind of man he was. So humor, and he wasn't a quick reactor. And I think that's something I've learned. He learned to pause,
And respond.
think before he reacted, and he was a businessman, so he dealt with a lot of people, so that was the thing on humor, and I think that is one of the key gifts that I talk about in the book. The other one I talk about is traditions and rituals and practices that you have in your family that are so important. And the reason they're important is because traditions and rituals help to make a child feel secure and make them feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Like a sense of belonging.
Yes, it is a sense of belonging, but it's a sense of belonging to something more too, that they're only a piece of the big picture. So what that does is it tends to make you feel less self-centered and more part of a community, and more take the responsibility of being part of a community. My father had his little rituals, like when people would come to visit us and they would leave. We lived on a very busy street. He would go outside onto the porch and he would stand there and wait, talk to them until they got to their car, wave to them as they went, and he would stay there until they were out of sight.
Sounds like my father.
To this day, I can't drive by my home in my hometown without looking there and almost seeing him standing there waving.
Exactly. And it was like he wouldn't tell you that he was emotional, but you could see the tears.
Yeah.
Because he was sad that you were leaving. He wasn't sure when he was coming, but when you were coming back. Yeah, my dad was the exact same way. And he would never stop you or tell you to come back. He never guilted you. Mind you, my mother, on the other hand, was a completely different story.
Yeah. And he would he would stand there and he would wait a while, because there were times we'd go around the block and he would wait to see if we came around that way, and he would wave to us again. But that was one of the things he did, and the fact that I can remember that from when I was young, and then the other thing I remember from when I was like, oh, I don't know, 3, 4, was that he would come into my room at night and he would tuck me in, and a lot of parents do that. But his ritual was to pull the blanket right up to my neck and then take the pillow corners and pull them over the blanket so it wouldn't move. Just to, snug as a bug in a rug kind of thing
Yep.
was true to him. But the reason the book is called Coffee and Wisdom, and it shows a table, I'll let you see it right here. The reason it has a table with cookies
Very,
and a pad is
very inviting.
because from the time I was little, my father would come in my room and say, hey, come have a glass of milk with some cookies and we'll talk. And we did. And then when I got to be 12, I said, I want coffee now. And I started drinking coffee. But we would talk every single night. Sometimes I'm sure when I was younger, it was like 15, 20 minutes. But as I got older, it got longer and longer. And in the book, I had written for a writing project, a writing course I took, I had written a little 2 or 3 page short story kind of, but it was really more like a memoir. And it was like my father and I every single night talking, and my mother every single night coming into the kitchen and saying, hey, you two, she's got to go to school, you got to go to work, it's time to get to bed. And not, and then towards the end when he was so ill, she would say, you've got a doctor's appointment in the morning, you got to hang up now. But we would do that every single night, and we would sit there and we would talk, and it would be the kind of talking that was not just superficial. He would say, how was your day? And I'd say, it was okay. Well, that wasn't good enough. And he'd say, why was it just okay? What happened? Something happened that upset you, or what's going on? And he was the kind of communicator that always looked you right in the eye when you were talking, which is key to do with your children. And he would he would treat that conversation like an onion and very carefully peel the layers of the onion away and get deeper into the conversation. So he would get to how I felt about something, what I thought about something, why I thought what I thought, what led me to that conversation. So he really trained me to be a critical thinker from an early age and to not just take things at face value. Well, why do you believe that? Who told you that? Did you look it up? He would be a very interesting man today with the internet and
Yes.
his ability to really research and look up stuff, or to watch on television more than one thing, because he was an avid TV watcher. And we would talk about shows, we would talk about family dynamics. Why do you think that kid did that? Today he'd be able to stop and pause and have the conversation. Back then we would just have to talk over and, what we
You
were
missed
what
half
we
of
were
it.
saying. Yeah, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
yeah. He sounds like a very special person. It's
Yeah,
you're
he
very
was. He
blessed. Yeah.
he was. We were very blessed to have him. There's no question. And he didn't change. 13 years later, when my sister was going through the phases I was going through, he was doing the same thing with her, sitting at the kitchen table. They talked a lot of politics. He and I talked a lot of politics as well. And football. He was an avid football lover. I mean, he would be so happy today being able to watch 2 or 3 games at a time. you know, Back then he had the TV and then he had a radio playing another game kind of thing, doing both. But so so I think that, humor is important, rituals are important. We have a ritual. We have a total family dinner Christmas Eve. It's our seven fishes dinner. We're Italian, and I don't know if you know about that tradition, but in the Italian culture, Christmas Eve is a time for the entire family to come together and have fish, no meat on Christmas Eve. It was a Catholic thing. And my father, we did that every year. Every year we would have cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whoever, and friends that became part of our family. And my father said to me, you can live anywhere in the world, and I encourage you to travel and see the world as much as you can. He was a Navy man.
Mhm.
Travel and see people. He said, but Christmas Eve, no matter where you are in the world, you're here in this house. And I said, well, it's one night. And he said, no, it's not one night. It is the one night a year that our entire family gets together. The reality is, you don't know who will not be in this family 1 year from now. So this
Oh,
may be the last time to talk to them. Make
yeah.
sure you're home. My sister would fly. She was in retail, and Christmas Eve is a huge retail day. She would fly out of Boston in the late afternoon to be home for dinner and turn around and go back the day after Christmas. At great expense, she would do that, but she was home. And to this day, most of our aunts and uncles are gone, but we do Christmas Eve. We do a seven fishes dinner. It may not be on Christmas Eve because now people are just traveling to other families or married. They've got their own kids, but
Yes.
we do it. So traditions are critical, and I would encourage parents to talk about rituals, have rituals with their kids. Grandparents should have rituals with their grandchildren, as well as I do.
Very good. Tell us about the anomaly in you and how you discovered it.
I discovered that I was different when I was in elementary school, and I would challenge teachers with no thought. And my mother would hear about how I wasn't acting up, but I was involved in things I shouldn't have been. I found it very difficult not to get involved when I saw a problem or when I saw an issue that I thought needed to be fixed. In third grade, I'll never forget, there was a girl in my class, and we live in central New York, so it was winter and it was cold and there was snow on the ground. And she didn't have boots. She had a pair of sneakers that were falling apart and her feet were sticking out of it. And I remember going home and saying to my mother, I want to buy her a pair of sneakers. How much do they cost, and can we afford it, or can I work to get some money for it? And my mother said, tell me what's going on. I told her, and she said, well, we don't want to just buy a pair of sneakers and give them to her. That would embarrass her. Let's think about this for a minute. Because my mother was an incredibly empathic. In fact, most psychics told my mother she should have been doing what they were doing.
Oh, wow.
So she said, let's do this. She said, let's do a clothing drive and have all the kids in the class bring to school clothes that don't fit them anymore, that are still nice, things that they're willing to give away and share. We'll do a clothing exchange. We'll go out and buy the sneakers, and you can give her your sneakers. And so I did that, took them out of the box so they didn't, they look new, but I said to her, they look new because they never fit me right. I don't like them. You can have them. So we got her sneakers. So from when I was little, I just remember arguing. I remember arguing on a cause for my cousin who was going to Catholic school at the time, and the nuns were being horrible to her about her hair. They wanted her hair she had very curly hair. They wanted her hair to not, they wanted to brush it out before she got on stage and stuff. And I remember arguing with a nun and saying, if you don't leave her alone, I'm taking her home. She's not going to be in the show. I probably was 11 at the time. So, and to this day, I mean, there are promotions I didn't get because people felt I was too passionate about my work. Okay, that's fine by me. And my dad and I talked a lot about this, and he said, you got a lot of your mother in you. I said, I know I do. I just have this sense of right and wrong, and it would hurt me to see people get hurt, even, and
When they're suffering, you suffer.
yeah. And my mom and my dad were like that too. I mean, my father constantly, one of the chapters is about perspective and empathy, which are critical in today's world. They've always been critical, but they're really critical in today's world where we have so much cruelty going on. But my father would observe a situation, like let's say a customer came in and the customer was screaming at him about something, which happens. He would just take a step back and listen calmly, and then he would say, how can I make this better for you? And I remember thinking, man, how do you do that? And my father said, look, we can say we're going to walk in other people's shoes, and we can kind of understand where they are right now, but we're not carrying the baggage over our shoulder that they're carrying. We don't know what's happened to them. He said, that guy comes in and he screams at me, and I'm thinking in my head, what happened to him earlier today? I'm not going to ask him, but what happened to him?
That's
And
the
I said, well, why does it matter? He goes, well, let me pose this question to you. What if we all had a ticker tape across our forehead that told the person looking at us what had just happened to us? Now let's suppose that guy came in right after his doctor told him he had cancer.
Exactly.
Would you have reacted differently? And I said, well, sure. And he said, think about that when people are behaving in a way that bothers you. And so those are the kinds of conversations I would have with him if I would go home upset about something, like a teacher. I didn't know this teacher. I can't say why. What happened? Well, you don't know what's going on in his life.
I think that's the
Something can
difference
happen.
between empathy and compassion is being able to feel what the other person's going through. And I think as empaths, that's what we do
Yeah.
more, probably better than most. Like we
Yeah.
feel much
Yeah.
more deeply, more intensely.
Yeah. And I knew my father had some of that because when we would watch a television show and he would something really sad would happen, I could see his eyes tearing up. I could see him reacting viscerally to what he was observing. But getting back to perspective, I remember when Elvis and the Beatles were on TV for the first time on the Ed Sullivan Show. And when the Beatles were on, my mother, I mean, the girls were screaming. My father and I were watching it. My mother was in the kitchen cooking. She comes in and she goes, "What is all that screaming about?" And my father said, "These kids from England, everybody loves them." And my mother said, "Look at their hair." Yeah. And she was complaining about their hair. My father said, "Helen, close your eyes, listen to the music. They're really good."
You can't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what he did. Just take a step back, gain some perspective, think about why this might all be there.
He sounded brilliant.
He
You
he
were
he
very
was
lucky.
he was a good man and he didn't know it. And I'm so grateful that I got the chance to tell him before he passed
Yeah,
that
that was healing for both of you.
you are an amazing man. So I tell parents, okay, these are the gifts. These are really important. But there are some key things as parents, as grandparents, as child mentors, that you need to do intentionally. So intentional parenting, intentional teaching, intentional counseling. And those, I call them, I just have named them my 3 pillars of actions that need to be taken. The first one is to be a really keen observer of the child, of that child, not of your children, because each child's different. So you have to observe constantly what to learn the personality. In my first book there's a personality test, which is great. I love to do it with families. I made my family do it at Thanksgiving dinner one time. I said, "You're
I'm
taking
looking
this
forward to
test."
a copy of that list.
I said, "You're taking this test." And I said, "Okay, so observe your kids constantly so that you know for each of them what their likes are, what their dislikes are, what their fears are, what their concerns are, what their hopes are, so that from when they're little, understand who they are." I was observing my grandson, my youngest grandson, when he was in preschool. And I started watching how analytical he was. And I thought, man, this kid, he takes apart everything. And one time, my daughter and I went to pick him up. He was 3. And the teacher came over to us and she said, "You'll never believe what happened today with Austin." And I said, What happened?" And she said, "Well, we had a teacher assistant come in who was lovely and got down on the floor with them and was playing with trucks and cars and all of that." And she said, now she surprised me that she did that because she was a very, very large woman, but she got down on the floor and she was doing it with kids. She goes, "Well, Austin was behind her and she started taking a car and backing up. And as she's backing up, Austin, who's 3, goes beep, beep, beep." Well, my daughter was mortified and the teacher started laughing. She goes, "No," she goes, "Do you understand the thought process that kid had to do that? That was great." I mean, that teacher got it. She understood. So I think observing constantly is one pillar that is so critical, and really understanding what you're observing. The second thing parents need to do is to listen actively. And that means you don't look at your phone or the television while your kid is trying to tell you something. The phones are a terrible communication sink.
They're further disconnecting most of
Oh,
us.
totally disconnected. They're in the same room and they're texting each other. It makes me crazy.
Exactly. And their self esteem and self worth is all based on likes from people that may or may not even know who they are.
Right, right. And so listening actively means you make eye contact and you listen and you reflect back what you hear so that they know you're listening. And that is a skill that kids need to see from when they're toddlers, because when they're toddlers, they're coming to you with information and excitement and they want you to hear them. And if you say, "Oh, that's nice, honey," oh, and you're not really paying attention, when they're 14 and their friends are doing drugs and they want to talk to you about it, they're not going to come to you. They'll go to somebody else because you're not a good listener for them. You need to set that up early. And if they're teens now, start it now. It's not that you can't start doing these things. So you really need to listen actively and reflect back so that they know you've heard what they had to say. And the third pillar is to model carefully, because your kids are watching you, they're listening to you, they're hearing you, and they're reacting to your behavior. So if you're on the phone and you're screaming at people, they'll be a screamer. If you're on the phone or you're in a grocery store and you're being kind to somebody and you let them get ahead and you say, "No, that's okay, I'm not in a hurry and it looks like you are," things like that, they will be that kind of a person later. They will.
100%.
You are modeling all the time. And my father was a great model. I mean, one time we were in the grocery store. I was probably about 9. We were somewhat in a hurry. I wanted to go do something. I don't know about him, but I just wanted to be home. Didn't want to be there. And there was an older woman in front of us, and she couldn't find her checkbook, and she's searching and searching and searching to pay. And I'm getting antsy. And my father just put his hand on my shoulder and in Italian basically said, "Stop, stop it, just shh." Well, when we got out to the car, I said to him, "Dad, that took so much time." And he said to me, "Remember one thing, one of these days, you're going to be her age or older, and you too are not going to find something in your purse when it's critical. And you're going to want somebody to give you the grace of just waiting a minute." And to this day, when I go to the grocery store, never get upset about somebody taking time in front of me, because it's like my dad's right there. And I'm like, "Okay, Dad, I get it. I can wait this out."
I'm so patient and present that, yeah, I literally, if somebody needs to go first, wants to struggle or has to struggle, I let it
Mhm.
happen because I'm in no hurry and I'm quite happy usually where I'm at.
Right,
But
right.
it's funny, you mentioned a couple of things that came to light when you were talking. Number one, parents are bringing their kids in for therapy constantly. And in my opinion, it's not the kids. The kids are the symptom of the system that's
Ab-
happening in the family.
Absolutely.
The parents don't want to look at themselves and they're blaming the kids. The kids are kids. They're only learning what the parents are teaching them. And not having that communication is in fact a trauma. Like, you
Hmm.
turn it inwards. The child ends up thinking there's something wrong with them. They're not good enough, that they're not special enough, smart enough, whatever the case may be. The parents aren't doing their work and the kids are actually responding and reacting to their emotional ineptness, really.
Yeah. I mean, there are essentially two reasons why kids misbehave or behave inappropriately.
Mhm.
One is that they don't have security. They don't feel secure for whatever reason. They don't feel like
Matter.
they're safe. They don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And so they will look for other kids and peers to feel safe, or another community group to belong to where they could feel like they're part of something. So that is a big one. The security is huge. And the other reason is attention. They're not getting the attention they need to function from wherever they are, in the classroom or at home or whatever.
Mhm.
So, I went to a psychology conference one time, and one of the psychologists was talking about behavior, and he said, all of us have attention tanks, very much like gas tanks on a vehicle. And he said, and our attention tanks make us run or not. He said, the problem is some of us are Volkswagens and have Volkswagen size attention tanks, and some of us are Mack trucks.
That's awesome.
And he said, as a teacher, he was talking primarily to teachers, but this is true as a parent too. You need to understand how much you have to fill that tank. And here's the kick. If they don't get positive attention, they'll settle for negative attention. It's still attention. So think about that. Think about yeah, how
And
are
for
you gonna
someone
how are
like
you gonna give
myself,
them attention?
yeah, it happens even earlier in life, like from birth to 3 or 4. We're not capable of retaining memory physically in our brain till after the age of 3. So the cries that your infant's making is their way of communicating. They're crying
That's
for a
right.
reason.
That's right.
And I find most parents today, and in the past have been expecting the baby to conform to their routines, their schedules, when it should be the other way around. The baby's crying because they want to be held. The baby's crying because they want to be fed or nurtured or seen or mirrored. And if we're not responding to those babies, it's again, it turns inwards. The baby grows up thinking that they're not valuable, they're not of worth, they're not.
Right. I mean, we all know about, you know, love and affection and hugging your kids and touching your kids and putting your hand around them. I did that as a building principal. I did that as a classroom teacher. And when it got to be, I don't know, in the 90s, when they started saying you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't
It's
be
so
hugging
sad.
kids, I was like, well, fire me then,
Yeah.
because
Because
some of these kids,
providing to them what they weren't getting at home sometimes.
yeah, right. Or that they just needed more of. And it was
Yeah.
like, they obviously respond to this. And this helps tremendously for this kid to function and stay the course in school. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. What I say to parents, though, parents are very, very busy. And a lot of parents are doing, they take, especially single moms or grandparents raising their grandchildren. It's
Everything
like,
about that.
I don't have the time. I'm so busy. I've got 2 jobs, whatever. You don't need a lot of time to smile at your kid when he walks in the room and let
Hug
that
them.
smile reach your eyes. Not just a hi, but a really big smile like, I'm so glad you're here. Hey, you want to have a cup of coffee with me? You want to have a soda with me? Whatever. How was your day? That kind of thing takes 2 minutes. Walking a kid to the bus in the morning, if that's the only time you see them, then make it meaningful and say on the way, say, hey, when you're in school today, think about 3 things you want to come home and tell me about. And I will do the same. And tonight we'll just take 10 minutes and talk about what 3 things really excited you or upset you or whatever. And if you want to talk more, we can. So what I like to say to parents is take seemingly unimportant moments and make them important. Make them special. Take an ordinary moment and make it extraordinary for the kid. I had teachers who were masters at that. They would take a simple situation and just turn it into something so special. I had one teacher who got a a new child into the classroom. It was probably October, so a month of school had passed. Family moved in, and their son was in 3rd grade, and he was on the spectrum. And they were terrified because if you know anything about autism and the spectrum, transitions are very, very difficult. And they were very concerned because they knew that they were in for a lot of problems at home with him because of the change of school and the change of friends and all of that. So I said, let's have a meeting in my office with the teacher. Come back and let's just discuss your son individually. So we sat there and we said, and the teacher said, okay, what is his niche? We know that kids on the spectrum really excel or love or are really fascinated into one thing. And they kind of looked kind of embarrassed. And I said, look, we're all friends here. Tell us, we need to know your son. And they said, well, he's really into turtles. He loves turtles. Now, this is central New York. You'd be lucky if you ever saw a turtle. But anyway, he's really into turtles and he loves turtles. Every place we go, he has his room. His teacher said, okay, we got this. Well, that was on a Friday. On Monday, the kid comes to school. She had gone in over the weekend and she had totally reformed her classroom into like a aquarium, and she had turtle stuff everywhere. And she talked to the kids because he was coming in at 10 o'clock. We were making a big deal out of it. So she talked to the kids first and she said, we've got a new student. He's coming in. He is on the autism spectrum. And this is 3rd grade. And they were like, what is that? Because as a principal and administrator, I never believed in hiding things from kids or not talking about it. And as a director of special education, I encourage parents to be very open and honest about all of the pluses and minuses of their kid so that we could deal with it. So she told the kids, and when that kid walked in, he was awestruck. He was like, Mom, turtles. They
And
were
more
everywhere.
importantly, he felt like he belonged without
That's
anybody
right.
saying a word. Yes.
That's right. And he
Uh,
became part of that class almost immediately. The parents were like, oh my God, this was amazing.
yeah.
So that teacher took what was an ordinary moment, introducing a kid to the class and making it special. You know, that's what you can do as parents. And as grandparents, if you're going to make cookies, talk about whose recipe it is. Talk about the family and who in the family liked it or didn't like it, or a funny story about, oh, remember the time we used salt instead of flour? We made the mistake. That kind of thing, to just make it special. And storytelling is a great way to connect with your kids. If you want to, if they've done something wrong, talk about a time you did something wrong and what you learned from it, those kinds of things. So that's kind of what the whole book is about. It's about raising rich children without using your wallet. It's not about money. It's about leaving a legacy of character that will serve them well throughout their lives. I really believe that the greatest inheritance you can give your children is who they become.
And your presence. That's special. How has your life been different than what you imagined, Rosemary?
Well, I imagined being a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician, and that's what I strove for until I got to college in my first year of pre-med and could not, for the life of me, pass a calculus course. And calculus was a gatekeeper for med school. I also learned from that I probably have a math disability and that I transfer numbers the way dyslexics do letters. So I probably would have killed somebody, giving them the wrong amount of medicine or the wrong dose. So I went to my counselor and I said, I can't do this. I mean, the teacher got to me and said, basically, you can't move forward if you can't get this course. And my roommate was a math major and she tried and she said, I don't know what to tell you. So my counselor said, well, why do you want to be a pediatrician? What appeals to you about it? And I said, well, I want to work with children and I want to help them. And I'd love to work in a medical setting if I could. And he said, well, why don't you become a speech pathologist? I was like, what is that? I don't even know what it is. So he explained to me what it was. And I said, oh. So I met with the head of the speech pathology department and talked with him and liked him very much and said, okay. And from that, I became a teacher of the deaf. That led me into education, led me into administration.
I'm sure you were an awesome teacher just by listening to you. And the thoughts and the lessons that your father passed on through you were
Yeah.
special.
Yeah. He,
It's
he was
remarkable.
he was remarkable. We lost him way too early. But we had him. I had him for as long as I did, which was great, which was
How would you like
wonderful.
to be remembered? What would your legacy?
Um, I think for my legacy, I kind of have sort of put it on my LinkedIn thing. I just want people to remember that my passion was to make a positive difference in people's lives. That's my legacy. I have spent 40 years creating new programs, fixing programs that were broken, extending programs that needed to be extended, and throwing away things that were not serving anybody well. So I would say I want to make a difference, a positive difference in people's lives.
I think you already have. If this were to be our last conversation, what would you like to tell our listeners?
I would say to them, parenting is a journey, it's not a destination. And like any journey, it has its ups and its downs, it has its dead ends, it has its exciting views, it has some mishaps. Relax and sort of slide into a more calm parenting by just becoming close to your kids and understanding who they are and feeding them the things that they need to grow.
That's a beautiful message. Yeah. So often we overlook how to nourish them individually when we're so busy doing life. And it's literally when you slow down that all the answers come.
Yes, pausing is a great thing to do. And one quick thing that someone used the other day that I thought that's brilliant is when your kids are upset, and this isn't just for kids. I mean, all of these gifts you should give to your friends, to your family, to children, and anywhere. But I think it's important to just say, okay, I need to look at what's happening if your kid is very upset or someone's upset. And the best thing you can say to your kid, which I thought was brilliant, was, okay, do you need to be heard or hugged or helped? Because I'm willing to do one or all three. What can I do for you? Sometimes all they want is a hug.
Exactly.
Sometimes all they want is to vent and to be heard. And then sometimes they really need your intervention to help them in one way or another.
I agree. And as adults, sometimes we still need to be heard and have never had a chance ourselves to be expressive or understood. That
Mhm.
was for a lot of years because
Right.
I just didn't have, not that my parents didn't love me, but they just didn't know how to parent, period. The
Well,
emotional
no,
attunement was just not
no,
there.
nobody tells us how to. You know,
No.
you go to the hospital, you have a baby, they put the baby in your arms, and they teach you about car seats,
Yeah,
and and that's it. And then you're out the door. Okay,
exactly.
now
It
what?
we have a long way to go.
Right.
Not
And if
just
you
in the
haven't had a good
hospital.
model for
Yeah,
parenting, it's even harder unless you are inherently observant of life, which my dad was. He was very observant of life. His life was a tough life, and he learned from the toughness around him. He lost his mother, his sister, his brother, another sister, young. So,
yeah, and it's funny that we overlook so much that our as parents we want little mini me's and we want the perfect children because we think they're a reflection of us and it's not. It's the other way around. And if we could just reverse how things are,
yep,
we'd end up having mentally, physically, spiritually whole children and they'd be raised completely whole with peace inside. We have adult kids running around in the world not getting their needs met because they don't know how to communicate authentically.
right, absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a pleasure. Rosemary, where can people find your services and or your books?
Um, they can go to my website, which is rosemaryolander.com, and in there will be my email address and my books. The third page is three different pages. At the top right, you can find home, and then you can find books. You can click on both of my books are there. You can click on a link to Ex Libris. I'm also on Amazon. And my website is there as well, and my email is there as well, so they can find me at rosemaryolander.com
Perfect.
or
Thank you so much.
LinkedIn. Put my name into LinkedIn, and they'll come up with my profile.
It's been a pleasure having you. I think you're
Thank
doing
you.
wonderfully work in the world and hopefully it will make a difference. And when you do embrace your uniqueness, your differences, then you end up being right where you're meant to be in life. The authentic you, expressing yourself, and not worrying about what other people think. So
Right.
embrace your anomaly. And thank you. I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a good
Oh,
year.
you too.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye bye.